Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
So I learned a new word today.
Okay.
Polycule. Sorry, polycule.
Okay.
That is a group of people in a relationship with each other. So it's like more than a throuple,
Less than an orgy.
I guess. But
Okay.
again, you all have to live together.
Oh,
So it's like, so a throuple can be a polycule. A
Is it just-
polycule is not necessarily a throuple.
was it just a commune?
I guess, I don't know. My wife mentioned it because it came up at work with, I think it was with insurance. I'm like, do you have to
Oh.
insure every partner? How does that work out?
Yeah, that's probably interesting. Do you get
Yeah,
a
and
multi-card discount? What do you
exactly.
get?
I don't know. And then again, the question of yogurt in the refrigerator comes up.
Oh, I hate
Right?
when this question comes up. It grosses me out. But
It
yes,
always comes back to whose yogurt is that in my refrigerator?
I agree.
I'm sorry, in the communal refrigerator.
Right. Well, it's
So
never going to be mine because my refrigerator is only going to be sparkling water and champagne.
and the low duck sauce packets that come from the takeout
No,
place.
I get rid of
no.
those.
Okay.
I don't save those. I think it's gross when people save those.
All right.
I
For a
actually
sec-
use them all. I'm not that wasteful and I love duck sauce. So if I'm fully honest, I actually use all of the ones they send.
Okay, well, there you go.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
I thought I was on an airplane this weekend when I opened the mailbox because I got in the mail the Sharper Image catalog.
What?
I
It's
didn't.
back?
It's out. It is back with a vengeance. They now include little quotes from users for some of these things where you're like, this looks ridiculous.
Mm.
For example, the stainless steel steam cleaning grill brush.
Yes.
Big Jim from Boston says the steam helps clean away grease and food residue, which is not really an endorsement. It's just a
No.
statement of something it does. But
Mhm.
here's what I was intrigued by on the cover here. You see, you got Santa, you got the tree,
Uh-huh.
and he's got like a,
Like a Theragun that also looks like a hairdryer.
I was going to say some sort of massaging element because
Yeah.
there's a ball there.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, why is Santa the one using this? Shouldn't Mrs. Claus be saving this for something? And again,
well, I think that one is probably a little too intense for Mrs. Claus.
what do you think? That's got to have an outlet. Like that's,
It definitely has an outlet.
yeah.
But I wonder if you can like adjust that. But because I feel like that one's actually really to work a knot out as opposed to
It might be,
relieve
yeah.
other stressors.
Right.
I'm not sure, but
It's just weird that Santa is mid-delivering on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. He's taking the time. He's out of the chimney. We don't know where the presents are, but he's then plugging in and using your power to
True.
work this out.
well, you could left all those lights on. So what's a little more wattage?
But they always in movies, they do that where I'm like, this is just a fire hazard waiting to happen. But maybe I'm just afraid our cat is going to eat all the lights and somehow start a fire because see, I was very confused by what Santa was up to here.
well, yeah, it looks interesting.
Yeah, relax and unwind with soothing heat. Yeah, you don't want to use it for any other stressors. It's a good shoulder workout. No mystery coupon.
Oh,
Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
It's no problem. It's a beautiful day here, though. I feel pretty lucky to be here.
And you're in Nevada, you said?
I'm in Nevada right now, yeah, and it's just gorgeous.
Excellent. Do you live there
I live
usually?
here part of the year now.
Okay.
My boyfriend bought a house here, and I've always been obsessed with horses. In fact, I had Icelandics and a mule and a couple grade horses out in Chicken for years. I've just always had horses, so I've got horses here too.
oh, I want to be there.
Where are you at?
I'm in Detroit. I had horses growing up, but I haven't had one in years. And I love Nevada and the weather and
Yeah.
horses.
You know, talking and going over all the places you lived, how did you end up in Chicken?
Okay, I'll give you the real story. I don't do this much because
Okay.
it's a little involved, but my ex-husband, who's an intrepid sailor, among other things, took a 10-meter, actually, which is 30-foot sailboat steel from Paris, France to Spitsbergen. And there were 3 guys on the trip. Spitsbergen is an archipelago above Norway. Wow. And it took the summer to get up there. And there was a guy on the trip named Andreas Pickler, and Larry Scott was on that first leg, because they kept the boat for the winter there. They pulled it out of the water and put it on a coal pile. And then in the next summer, they put it back in the water. So Andreas was kind of worse than Greg, my ex-husband, in that he would do things like go to the Himalayas, or no, the Andes. It was the Andes, and he went snowboarding there. I mean, he was just always doing stuff. So one year, this is the year before they sailed to Spitsbergen, Andreas with a couple friends went to Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, and built a raft out of logs, and they floated the whole way from Whitehorse, Yukon, on the Yukon River, all the way to the Bering Sea, which is really quite a ways.
Yeah.
Yukon is a big, and it's a dangerous thing to do too. At any rate, he told Greg, if you ever get to Alaska, you really should go to Eagle, because when you are on the river, you clear customs in Eagle, Alaska.
Okay.
Okay. And Eagle is a quirky little town. And so when Greg and I got together, I was working for Walden Book Company at the time, outside of Princeton in Lawrenceville. I had their #2 store. It was at, the name of the mall escapes me. But at any rate, I finagled a transfer to Anchorage. We decided to move to Alaska because we couldn't afford land in Bucks County.
Yeah, fair.
You need bucks to live there.
Yeah.
Hence
So
the
they
title.
say. Yeah.
So, because we liked it there, I mean, but it's way too expensive. And we were under the, sometimes I'm getting older and sometimes I word search, so you'll have to excuse me. I don't have dementia though, I got tested. We were under the impression that you could still homestead there. This was in 1987.
Mhm.
But you really couldn't. At any rate, so I got a transfer, and Greg avoided work at all costs. So he didn't have to he just got a job to get some money together so we could buy a truck. And being the sailor that he was, he actually tied an anchor into the engine area that was a spare for this F-150. And we drove to Alaska, where I was supposed to work, I don't know, a week or two after we got there. And we got there early, and we drove through the border down at Northway, and we were driving on the Alaska Highway, and there was a sign on the road that said Eagle, Alaska, and boom, the light bulb went off with Greg, and he said, you know, Andreas told me about that place, and we're ahead, so let's go up there. This was in March, I guess, and they had just started to open the road, because the Taylor Highway, where Chicken is situated,
Mhm.
the road is maintained from literally, legally, I think April through October 15th, but they start plowing usually the second week of March, and the people in Eagle start plowing down toward Tok, and the people that are based in Tok start plowing, and Chicken's kind of in the middle between those two places. So we thought, oh, what the heck, you know? So we decided to drive up the road, and our first night in Alaska, we spent on the Taylor Highway near Mount Fairplay, which is on the way to Eagle, to Chicken. And we got to the 40-mile bridge, which is about 40 miles from Chicken. We passed through Chicken. In fact, I had my first cup of coffee there in Alaska. The guy who was the trustees guy that was watching the place made us coffee, and we couldn't get to Eagle. because they hadn't opened up part of the road. But my ex-husband was a Navy diver. This is the long version, but
I
this
love
is
it.
Yeah, keep going.
No,
We're
no,
good.
this is
he
great.
was a
No.
Navy diver, and his job in Guantanamo Bay, one of the things he did was train Navy SEALs how to, I guess, dive. So he was a demolitions expert, and Chicken and is right around the Klondike Gold Rush area. And Chicken's claim to fame, besides the book Tisha, is gold mining. You know, the first people that were there were gold miners, and there are people still mining gold there. I mean, my youngest son Max does it sometimes. And so they suction dredge the rivers, which means there's pontoons and an engine, sometimes Volkswagens, sometimes Hondas, and they, depending on the inch diameter, you know, they have little tiny dredges that are 4 inches up to 10 that take a couple guys. And the guy that we met at the 40-mile bridge, David Likens, found out that Greg was a Navy diver and offered him a cabin. He offered him a job, you know, and Greg was like, wow, this sounds great. It didn't sound like a real job because he was never really interested in that. Even though he graduated Wharton and had lots and lots of bills from school.
Of course.
So we drove, after agreeing to do this, he drove me to Anchorage, and I rented a studio apartment in Bootlegger Cove, which I could literally ride a bike to work, and he went back to the 40-mile. So I was pregnant with my oldest boy, and I had gone from a staff of 27 with a number 2 store with my own receiving clerk to like a staff of maybe 4. And I was the receiving clerk. So I was like lifting up all these heavy boxes while I was pregnant, and that wasn't working out. So I got a medical leave, and I went out on the 40-mile with him. So we spent our first year accumulating cast off sled dogs that nobody wanted, but we were too stupid to realize that they were giving us all their dregs because we were chichacos.
Yeah.
He didn't work that much, but we had money. So living out there is expensive. So this was about 40 miles. We were on the 40-mile river at this point. And we spent the winter out there. I flew in a few weeks before the baby was due. I had the baby, we flew back out, and these are charters. They were expensive. They landed like literally on the road, and we were downriver, so we had to go up. And it was really not easy because my oldest son was colicky, and we were like back to the earth kind of people. So we didn't have Pampers. So I was like attempting in 90 below zero, 70 below zero, 80 below zero weather to wash and dry diapers. So plus there was no parental support. So I was like, there's a picture of me. I look like Charles Manson after spending, I mean, seriously, the crazy eyes. That was me after spending the winter locked up in a small cabin with a guy who was out there trapping marten and running dogs. And I was pretty much stuck at home with this colicky baby that I was constantly washing the diapers by hand. I mean, I have arthritis in my hands probably from that and all the pies I've made over the years. At any rate, and for entertainment, we would listen to Radio Moscow. Okay, this was like before the Soviet Union broke up, and there was nothing going on. Like that's all, there was no communication. We had an AM radio. We would listen to the Caribou Clatter on KCAM out of Glen Ellen, which is a religious station that reads messages to people at certain times of the day. They still do it. Okay, this is before everybody having like GPS phones and all that, and satellite phones. Nobody had those then. They were too expensive. At any rate, so I looked at him at the end when we finally could get out, and I said, you know, I think I'm going to go back to my mother for a while. So I did. And he followed me and begged me to come back. And he said, well, what will do to take you? I said, well, we need a way to make a living. And I want a driveway.
That's a
small
fair
things.
request.
Yeah.
It was bankrupt. Okay. Chicken that our 5-acre plot that their business is on, which is Downtown Chicken, the oldest business there. It was bankrupt, closed by the health board. And we made a really low ball offer on it because it was a way to make a living, kinda, even though it took the SBA 2 years to really okay the loan, even though he had a DD 214, because the previous people, lost it in bankruptcy. So they didn't know if it was really a valid business, but it was a business and it did have a driveway. It worked. So I didn't have to carry food on my back 4 miles down the river or up over a ridge. So I was like, well, we have a driveway, we have a way to make a living. And that's how I got to chicken.
And so you bought the town.
Basically.
Okay.
At that point, there was a little souvenir shop on the road, on the Taylor. We're on the road to the airport. We're a little off the road, the main road, which is up until recently was a 1 to 2 lane gravel road. Now it's been expanded.
Oh, wow.
And there's actual pieces they have tar areas, like
gentrification.
There's 10 miles of beautiful road from the Obama shovel ready thing. That took 2 years to build the 10 miles because they can only work in the summer.
Sure.
And we have it's mostly chip seal now, but when I first moved there, you could tell there was a hole in the road because somebody would stop, take their chainsaw out, cut a tree off and stick it in the hole in the road so you could see it. That was what people did. And it was the kind of road that you drove 35 miles an hour on at the best of times. It was a very narrow road. And interestingly, Holland America actually took buses up there at that point. They did. It was crazy. And they were our customers, people like that. And it was different then. There are 2 RV parks in town now. It's tourism and the people who travel to Alaska since I moved there, it has really changed.
What is the population of the town?
Right now, Postmaster and her husband are there. They're pretty private people. And the one RV park sometimes has a guy spend the winter there. So there was another gold miner, but he's not wintering there. When I lived there about 8 winters. There were probably 4 families with children there. So the population at that point, I think, was in the
booming.
Yeah.
But now I think it's 2 to 3.
Wow.
And yet they keep the post office open.
You've got to.
Twice a week we get mail, and we all buy our stamps there, even in the winter. If I need a stamp, I'll write to her, I'll email her because she's got HughesNet now. And pretty soon we're all going to have Starlink, I guess. Thank goodness for that. So I can email her. When I lived there, you couldn't email. I mean, I literally would wash the laundry by hand. Sometimes when it got overwhelming, I would mail it to Toke and have a friend do it. I mean, we lived in a primitive way. We had the toilet outside. Do you want to hear about how we lived?
Yes, of course.
Segging, whatever that word is. What I routinely did, I would get up in the morning. At that point, I had the biggest memories are when the kids were small, and we'd have breakfast. At that point, we actually had a pet hen named Rosie that we kept in a cage by the door. And the kids would take her out and play with her. And she would lay an egg a day. But Greg, being the sailor, he was like, you can keep eggs. You just have to keep turning them. So down in the basement, which was an earthen basement, which we had a gravity drip diesel heater that basically heated the house. We had wood backup. And do you remember in the old days, you're not old enough, but my grandmother's house, they had the heater in the basement. And then there was like a wide grill that the heat would rise. Have you ever seen that? That's the way our house was. Our house was built in 1949 by Fred Terwilliger. And I met him and his wife, and his son is still alive, who was raised in our house. So our house is pretty old.
Yeah.
We got it. And so we heated with diesel, and I would get up and we'd have breakfast. Toward lunch, I'd suit the kids up, and we'd go out with snow shovels, and we had cardboard boxes that the kids and I would shovel clean snow in, avoiding the floaters, which are the snowshoe hare poopies.
Mhm.
And we'd bring the boxes in the house and dump them into a 55-gallon clean drum that Greg had made a butcher block top for. We'd take that off, we'd put the snow in there, but there was water in it. And he put a big 500-gallon water tank underground. And so we would let some of the water in that, and he had a battery and an RV pump to the sink. So we had cold running water. And we also had a working drain. Most people have slop buckets that they empty out in a situation like that, but our drain actually worked. It was canted correctly. And talking about cants, how we got the diesel to the heater was we had a 500-gallon tank filled, and then we had probably 8 or 9 55-gallon drums that he would fill with diesel, and he would use the rotary hand pump to pump it into the big tank. And then the big tank was plumbed with a 2-inch metal pipe that went from the heater across the ceiling of the basement, which was our floor upstairs. And the heat from the metal pipe, even when it was 60 and 70, and I've seen 80 below there, there would still be enough liquid diesel that we never really lost the heat and had to go to wood. The reason it's helpful is if you ever leave, you don't lose your potatoes or any vegetable you have. Most of the time when we shopped, we would shop like a lot right after it was cold enough that we didn't need freezers, and we would bring in, 5 months worth of food there.
Wow. How did you figure all this out? Like
It's
moving from,
logistically.
I'd be dead in.
I
Well,
would
the thing
too.
is, a lot of people, they don't, we laugh when the hunters come out and they're like, oh, do you have any spare water, or do you have any of this? After you live in a situation like that, when you're a 5 to 6 hour drive to like Fairbanks, I mean,
Yeah.
Toke's pretty good now. They've got, a good grocery store, and they have a really good, actually, hardware store, and you can get milled lumber there, rough milled lumber. You really have to be organized to live successfully in the bush. So
Yeah.
the kids hated it because there weren't very many kids to play with. I hated it because it was very, very quiet. And after a while, I mean, those are the days of the cassette tapes,
Mhm.
that you put in for the video.
VHS.
Yep, the VHS, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we watched Orfeh probably 100 times.
I love it.
And the kids were okay. I mean, but we did homeschool there for a while, but then I finally said, this is enough. I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an interesting experience though.
Amazing.
And some people still live like that. I mean, please don't say their names.
Yep, we'll
Well,
just
we
cover
can-
that,
we
bleep
can
it
cut
out.
out. Yeah.
And her husband, he's a gold miner, a very successful one. And his family had a gold mine there when he was a kid. So he's been in Chicken a long time. And they live this way to this day, but she does let him run the post office. And he does do that for her so she can get out, because she's a pretty social person. And so she's often gone, and she can also get specialty food now. She can just email Larry down at the grocery store in Toke. And he, I don't know what he charges her. He's a really nice guy. Maybe he does it for free. He runs it down to 40 Mile Air, who brings our mail in Tuesdays and Fridays. So she gets fresh veggies. I mean, we had a friend named Gordon Haber who was a wolf biologist, and he studied wolves in Denali specifically, but he also had a pack near us, and he would spend a couple days. Warblow Air, Art Warblow used to fly him in. And that was always something, because he would bring in fresh lettuce or a pizza. And fresh lettuce, you put,
I know which one I'd pick.
to keep it from freezing, you put it in a cooler.
Mhm.
Okay,
That's
makes sense.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This
This is so fascinating. And I love that there are so few people, but every single person you've mentioned is the most fascinating person ever. Like, oh, and he was a wolf biologist. Of course,
Right.
he was a wolf
Right.
biologist. Like what?
Well, I mean, he didn't live there. He came in to track the wolves.
Sure.
He ended up passing in a crash, which is too bad. Gordon was really something. No, there's a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of weirdos too. I mean, when you get out in the bush, there's a lot of weirdos, but that's just because people think, it's kind of like an end of the road place.
Mm-hmm.
People don't fit in other places. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't fit in that well. I mean, I was a successful bookstore manager just by happenstance. I was very good at piling books up and ordering.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I loved it. I love books. I mean, I'm always reading.
So you had some time while you were in Chicken to get through some stuff.
Until I had children.
Well, yeah, they ruin everything.
Yeah.
Oh, trust me. What do you think I'm hiding out in the basement?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So
I used to routinely cross country ski at 60 below zero just to get out of the house. There's no glide at that temperature.
Yeah. There's nothing at that temperature.
Well, I mean, actually it's really quite beautiful in the winter.
I mean,
it's just amazing. And you hear the air below Raven wings actually being pushed. They're the only things that are moving at 60 or 70 below zero. Everything else is buried in the snow.
See, I think this is where we differ in our personalities. You're saying it's beautiful. You can hear all this stuff. You're out in nature. I would just be thinking, well, this is where they're going to find my body. Like no matter when.
I found bodies out there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, you need to be really organized. I was talking to my friend Lynn this morning, and we were talking because she's been to Alaska a couple times, and we were just talking about winter. And I always said it was kind of like the ocean out there. It's so easy to freeze. When you drive your car in a situation where they just opened the road, or your truck, you have sleeping bags, you have water, you have shovels, you have chain, you have kitty litter to throw underneath your tires because you're out there by yourself. And some people just don't get it. They don't understand. You can't, your phone doesn't work. I mean, there's no cell service there.
Right.
You can't check the weather or see what's going on Facebook out there unless you're hooked up to the internet through satellite. And when I was there, that stuff didn't exist because I was there before.
Right.
So, yeah.
So downtown Chicken, what's there to do there? Obviously, post office Tuesday, Friday, got to be happening.
Right.
Is there saloon, some sort of restaurant?
Yeah, we own the Chicken Creek Cafe, the Chicken Creek Saloon, because Chicken Creek, guess what, is a stone throw away. The Chicken Liquor Store and the Chicken.
That's a good one.
Pile.
Do you have T-shirts for Chicken Liquor?
Of course, no, actually, we did have Chicken Liquor, but they didn't sell well.
What?
You got to be kidding me.
No.
Oh my
God!
God.
Really a cool design because it's like
Crystal too right now.
Yeah, losing faith in humanity.
Yeah. So no, but we have Downtown Chicken T-shirts, and we have a gas station that sells gas and diesel.
Okay.
So during COVID, that was when my son Max took over. He was running the show with just one other person, and I would do logistics and drive back and forth. And then last year I helped set up the gift shop and then just did logistics and drove back and forth from Fairbanks because it's cheaper to buy food in Fairbanks than to use the food service people. They're really expensive. So yeah, there's a bar there. People come down to the bar, and during COVID, we had get-togethers every Saturday night, and the different gold mining camps would sponsor the protein, and we do the fillers. And
I have to ask here, what are the various proteins? I'm assuming there's an elk of some sort.
No, we don't have elk there. We have caribou.
Okay.
We have moose, and we have fish. Most of the fish that we eat at the get-togethers are from when people go fishing down on the Kenai. There's salmon in the Yukon, but in our river, there's grayling, which are, I think, like an Arctic char, which are good, but you can't really freeze them. You have to eat them right after you catch them. And then there's something called a burbot, which is actually quite good. It's a bottom feeder, but they're not that easy to catch.
And I guess we skipped the first, what would seem to me to be the obvious question. How did the name come to be?
Oh yeah, that is the obvious question.
Yeah, we're not good
In
at
fact,
this.
we have
Clearly.
it on the back of our
We've only been
postcard.
doing it 3 years. But you were saying.
The obvious, well, Ann Purdy, who was the teacher in the book Tisha, which is about chicken in 1927, wrote a little blurb about how there were two stories, how chicken got its name. The first story, which I believe, is that all the gold miners, and there were like 600 to 800 before they discovered gold on the Klondike, they were actually a lot of people in chicken. And then when they found it over in Canada, I guess it was easier. So they all just left, except for a few, but they were trying to feed themselves. And our state bird is the willow ptarmigan, which is a very chicken looking critter. And all these gold miners wanted to name the town Ptarmigan. They thought, well, we're eating it. Look at how many there are. Let's call it ptarmigan. But they couldn't agree on the spelling. So that's how chicken got its name.
That's
Hilarious.
amazing.
I love it.
And I think that's the truth. Okay.
That sounds true to me.
Yeah.
But, you know, also Ann Purdy said that the gold nuggets were so big in Chicken Creek, as big as hen's eggs. That's how they.
Yeah, I like the first story.
I do
better.
too. First one's better.
Yeah.
That's
So there's no electricity in chicken. This is all
Unless you
generator.
make it yourself.
Right. I guess
Mhm.
that's changed as well. Can you do
Oof.
solar there?
Actually, we're just going to put in a solar system. Max is going to do it this year, but with the new infrastructure bill, there'll be better funding.
Mm.
Yeah, it's true.
So we've always run with diesel generators. And, you
Wow.
know, it's an expense. And plus, I'm not as good at filling out forms as Max is. So he's pretty good at filling out the forms and getting help.
That's
So yeah,
good.
we're going to do that. And yeah, when I lived there to run that TV and the VHS player,
Mm.
we used to keep a little suitcase Honda generator in the kitchen. It's like a galley kitchen and right by the door. Because you couldn't start it at 50 or 60 below. When it's that cold, literally you put a cardboard box on it with a hole cut for the exhaust. You start it, and you've been living with it right next to the jar of mayonnaise, because we never had a refrigerator either. And then we would be able to watch TV. And we had electric lights in the house, and we also had propane lights, like people's hunting cabins. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
of course.
have a propane light. Well, we pretty much lived with propane lights.
Oh my god.
And then when we were living large, we would turn the electricity on. The last winter I was there, I ran that generator every night. I couldn't, it's so dark.
Oh,
I can imagine.
It's so dark. And there's nothing to do, really. I mean, if you're very introverted, it's the perfect place. It's a great place to read philosophy. But
Yeah,
if
that
you want to just have
Yeah.
kind of a normal life, like when I moved into Fairbanks with the kids, you know, they snowboarded. I substitute taught to pay for the snowboarding. You know, we didn't have a lot of money, but I mean, we ate out, I think, 2 times the whole time we lived there.
wow.
And, you know, because it's expensive and I was on a budget.
Yeah.
So, but the kids turned out well, and they're both still in Fairbanks.
That's something.
That says a lot.
Well, Fairbanks is a pretty nice place to live. And,
So
you know, chicken is too, but it just wasn't for me in the winter. I did it
Yeah.
for quite a few years though.
You did do it for quite a few years. It's so impressive.
Yeah, I don't really talk about it much. In fact, some weather channel, chicken was the first really cold temperature last year, and they interviewed me for like 5 minutes, and they sent me the link. So I showed it to my dentist manager, and she looked at me like I was insane. And sometimes, you know, the tourists that come in, I don't really say much anymore, but because my job is almost over now, but sometimes they look at you like you're a zoo animal because it's so different than the way most people live. They
Right.
just don't
Yeah.
understand it. But there is a certain beauty to it. And it's really, it's a reality that's pared down to the basics, and the basics are important. So, I mean, it's that there was a book years ago called Carry Wood and Water, basically just survival that kind of centers you. And I think some of the experiences that I've had over the years there and doing other things that were a little different has made me more resilient as a person, and certainly more organized.
For more information on Chicken Alaska, you can check out the town's website, chickenalaska.com. And if you're interested in staying, bring a sleeping bag. They don't have a hotel.
You can check us out on all the various socials. Be sure to visit our website, and don't forget to leave us a review.
Today's show is produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?